According to a recent official congressional statement from Senator Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence, and the chair, Senator Marco Rubio, the greatest national security threat to the United States, in bipartisan resolve, is the Chinese Communist Party that will stop at nothing to exert its global dominance. While this may be the present determination of Senator Warner, it remains a fact that on March 27, 2020, an intelligence estimate was delivered to him regarding a variant migration pattern of a novel coronavirus from Wuhan that appeared to defy epidemiological projection models that were included as a reference to the WHO novel coronavirus 2019 NCOV Situation Report 3, dated January 23, 2020. Situation Report 3 had included a footnote reference to a standard migration projection that had been prepared by Moslab on January 20th, 2020, that had clearly demonstrated that after successfully escaping the spread of infections that would require a human host transport, had somehow avoided the top 17 domestic and international destinations from Wuhan Airport and had begun to proliferate en masse in the Republic of South Korea, the avowed enemy of the People's Republic of China. A similar pattern was found in Wuhan, the 42nd largest city in the world, where the primary infections appear to have occurred amongst farming families, the political opposition in the city of Wuhan. A similar pattern appeared to present aboard the Diamond Princess, a cruise line out of Yokohama, Japan, that found highest incidence of infection in American passengers. For unknown reasons, the World Health Organization refused to respond to inquiries regarding the finding that had been buried not just in a footnote reference, but in the body of the report that it had cited for authority. Similarly, Senator Warner has chosen to refuse to acknowledge publicly the respond to the intelligence estimate that had been submitted to him in March, which would be consistent with many opinions expressed by the Virginia Democrat Party leaders and activists, as demonstrated in an article that had appeared in Blue Virginia in August, comparing Senator Amanda Chase's posture on COVID-19 with that of Governor Ralph Northam, describing the governor's posture as driven by science and data, reality-based, responsible, reasonable, focused on all of us working together, and describing her position, as well as many of her fellow Republicans, as being inclined to buy into conspiracy theories, such as the thought that COVID was created out of China and prone to extreme hyperbole and hyper-individualism. The first mass use of anthrax spores as a weapon is said to have taken place during the Japanese occupation of China from 1932 to 1945. The Japanese allegedly experimented with the use of anthrax and other biological weapons in Manchuria, and some 10,000 deliberately infected prisoners are thought to have died as a result. However, the Air Force assessment makes no mention of the Japanese mass deployment of anthrax as a biological weapon, but rather rests its assessment regarding the reluctance of the Chinese Communist Party to deploy biological weapons based upon what they described as the suffering the country saw due to Japan's use of Shigella and plague against the nation. But Shigella infection is associated only with symptoms of diarrhea, sometimes bloody, fever, and stomach cramps, not death. Most Americans are familiar with the anthrax attacks by mail that ensued after the 9/11 terror attacks against the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in the year 2001, linked to Bruce Evans by the FBI and claiming the lives of 5 Americans, as reported by NPR. And while there was expressed a great fear that these biological weapons might be deployed by Iraq during the first Gulf War, researchers at the University of Southern California LA the University of California, LA, have also reported a summary of events in the 1990s connected to the one publicized case of the use of anthrax for terrorist aims by Aum Shinrikyo group in Japan. And these terrorists were alleged to have tried unsuccessfully to release anthrax in Tokyo several times, leading them to change to sarin gas with fatal results. One problem noted in that report as to the production of large amounts of anthrax in powder form necessary for its use as an effective large-scale weapon is a complicated and expensive process, for it requires the use of large centrifuges for repeated washings and then intensive drying to produce the concentrated or military-grade powder. And during the 1990s, it was believed that the cost of this technology has led some experts in the United States to argue that the instigators of the present campaign must be a country with previous experience, stocks, and the necessary biotechnological expertise. And according to UN Inspector Scott Ritter, terrorists do not have the facilities to weaponize anthrax. So if you have military-grade anthrax being used, this should be the first solid evidence of state sponsorship. Prior to that time, according to the CDC, there is evidence that the German army used anthrax to secretly infect livestock and animal feed traded to the Allied nations by neutral partners. An example of this undercover biological warfare was the infection of the Argentinian livestock intended for trade with the Allied forces, resulting in the death of 200 mules in 1917 and 1918. That was World War I. And as noted before, the Japanese were noted for the use of anthrax that was attributed to approximately 10,000 deaths in Manchuria during the Second World War. It is of note, in addition to the prohibitive costs associated with the deployment of anthrax in a powdered form, the CDC states that the disease most commonly occurs in wild and domestic animals. For example, cattle, sheep, goats, camels, antelope, and other herbivores. Anthrax occurs in humans when they are exposed to infected animals or tissue from infected animals, or when they are directly exposed to B. anthracis. Depending on the route of infection, anthrax disease can occur in three forms: cutaneous, gastrointestinal, and inhalation. There is only one isolated case in 2005 acknowledged by the CDC where evidence suggests that a victim may have been infected by environmental contamination, and they described that incident as the miracle case. One prohibitive factor for the use of anthrax as a biological agent for warfare is that it requires an infectious dose of 8,000 to 50,000 spores, reducing considerably the risk of infection to anyone outside as a collateral damage, but also reducing the risk to a person that is deploying it, which would be very desirable. Unlike the avian flu, H1N1 influenza A virus that set off the Spanish flu pandemic, a variety of virus for which the base virus enjoys a secondary attack rate ranging between 20 to 40%, increasing the potential for wide and uncontrolled collateral damage. The Spanish flu, according to the Department of Defense, claimed the lives of between 50 and 100 million persons worldwide, or approximately 2 to 4% of the world population. But according to a report co-authored by Dr. Anthony Fauci at the National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Diseases, at least 90% of the fatalities were not attributed to the flu infection, but rather by a knockout blow induced by co-infection from pneumonia. The CDC has further concluded that the knockout blow from pneumonia was directly attributed to mandates for persons to wear facial coverings, which accumulated on the mask, contaminating their breathable air. In sum, like the extensive mandate for mask use during the construction of the Panama Canal, recommended based upon the failure of scientists at the time to assess the true causative agent for conditions of yellow fever and malaria, and rather to apply to general public prevention guidance. Extraordinary and unnecessary losses up to $22,000 in Panama were sustained. Similarly, Governor Ralph Northam has chosen since the beginning of April to pursue the peculiar defense strategy of evading the sheriff for the city of Alexandria in service of the summons and in contempt of court in a lawsuit brought in challenge against the lockdown, and has since June similarly chosen to evade the United States Marshal in obstruction of justice, a felony punishable by fine and or up to 20 years in prison, and a court challenge to the facial covering mandate in federal district court on allegations raising a similar theory regarding the pathogen being deployed as a biological agent of terror and not being spread as a communicable disease being transmitted from person to person, as the governor has repeatedly described as highly contagious, contrary to many large sample size tracer contact studies. Under federal law, whoever involving conduct transcending national boundaries and in specific circumstances as described in the Act, to include when the intended victim is the United States government, a member of the Uniformed Services, or any official, officer, employee, or agent of the legislative, executive, or judicial branches, or any department or agency of the United States succeeds in the killing or grave bodily harm of any such person with a dangerous weapon, such as a biological weapon of terror, within the boundaries of the United States, shall be punished up to a penalty of death or by imprisonment for any term of years or life, while for attempting or conspiring the same to commit an offense for any term of years up to the maximum punishment that would have applied had the offense been completed. Similarly, immediately after Lindsay Seymour, an environmental engineer at Virginia Tech, was a co-signatory with 238 scientists who had petitioned the World Health Organization to modify the guidance for the threat model on the spread of COVID-19 from a pathogen that is being transmitted by droplets being spread from person to person to a threat model where aerosols or small particles measuring less than 5 microns, which can remain suspended in the breathable air for up to 2 hours, was the primary means of infection. An inquiry was posed to her in early August, regarding the weaponization potential for COVID-19, a pathogen that every credible large sample size tracer contact study to date has failed to validate as an infectious disease, finding a secondary attack rate of less than 5%, or 4 times too low to be accurately described as an infectious, much less highly contagious pathogen. She has refused to issue any response. Hyper-individualism. According to recent official congressional statements from Senator Mark Warner, joined by Senator Marco Rubio, the greatest national security threat to the United States is the Chinese Communist Party that will stop at nothing to exert its global dominance. While this may be the present determination of Senator Warner, it remains a fact that on March 27, 2020, an intelligence estimate was delivered to him regarding a variant migration pattern of a novel coronavirus from Wuhan that appeared to defy epidemiological projection models that were included as a reference to the WHO Situation Report number 3. To date, he has yet to respond. All facts that this leading infectious disease control expert should know better than any. This briefing has been unclassified. That concludes this briefing. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. I ask every Christian, every conservative, every Republican, every Virginian, and every American tree to, like the motto of the infantry, follow me, and we shall overcome. Honest. And y'all come back now. Here. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.